Cities are
a great place to live.
Creative.
Everyone mixing together.
Happy.
fun.
Frustrating.
Filled with energy.
Magic.
America has always had a love-hate relationship with cities. Yet over 80% of us live in urban centers, a number expected to reach 90% by the year 2050.
The city has become our home, the place where our future will unfold. So making that future the best it can be becomes one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century.
People are moving to cities to have a better chance for themselves, for their kids, for education, for health, to connect, to be together.
In a city, there's a sense of a public realm, of public places, of a sense that we all own this together, we're all in this together.
Saving the City is one of the most ambitious and multifaceted examinations of the urban experience ever undertaken. Featuring a multi-part national television series, along with a comprehensive educational curriculum, the objective of Saving the City is nothing less than the creation of an ongoing national dialogue about the challenges, opportunities, joys, and frustrations of our lives as urban dwellers. Saving the City is organized around the issues that every urban center faces to one degree or another. Issues such as housing,
Living in a community mixed in age, as well as race and gender and orientation and place of origin, all of those things really, really matter to giving a richness to our lives.
Food.
Food has been crucial to environment and making environment whole since man first dragged a beast back into the cave and put a picture of it up on the wall.
Performing and visual arts.
Cities historically have been places where people created culture as well as consumed culture, and they still are.
Transportation.
Great cities can only thrive, especially as they attain greater densities, if there's transportation choices that are available to everyone to move around.
And parks.
To be successful, a city really has to understand how to integrate nature and the built city.
we explore these issues through the eyes of decision makers, politicians, planners, architects, developers, as well as the critics and commentators who are the keenest observers of the urban scene. But equally important are the perspectives and ideas of ordinary citizens who live their urban experience every day. Their stories, gathered in more than 30 cities around the U.S. and Canada, are the heart of Saving the City, including the tales of triumph and stories of struggle.
When we get it wrong, cities can be terrible places. And the challenge for us as architects, as planners, as urbanists is how do we get it right and what went wrong and what can we learn from both the successes and failures.
One issue affecting the vibrancy of even the most successful cities is how to attract families with children to the urban core and how to keep them in town when their kids reach school age.
This is a tale of two beautiful and prosperous cities, Vancouver and San Francisco. In recent years, both have undertaken very similar projects to create new neighborhoods where rail yards used to be, along Falls Creek in Vancouver and at Mission Bay in San Francisco. One has been a spectacular success, one has not.
As far as the city of Vancouver, going right back to the 1970s, we had a reform council and they decided that we wanted families with children in the city. So it was very much a public policy objective.
From the beginning, we said there needed to be a clustering of community facilities at the heart of that new neighborhood that we were designing. So that meant a community center, childcare, and the school.
I can remember when we had the public meetings about the design of the Elsie Roy School, and all these families with children showed up. I was just amazed. It became very apparent that the school was going to be full the moment it opened.
It is never too early to start planning for the school. It's the absolute bedrock of building healthy society.
But that's not what happened in San Francisco's Mission Bay. Despite land being given to the school district, no school has been built, and separate playgrounds and a Little League park remain fields of dreams.
Okay, bye.
Mommy, kiss goodbye.
Have a good day.
That leaves Mission Bay families like the Wallaces with limited neighborhood options and a grinding commute to get their kids to school.
Mission Bay was just being built out, and there was a lot of talk around the mayor wanting to create a neighborhood in the city that was very kid and family friendly. One of the things they said in this neighborhood, there would be a school just within blocks. The school has not come to fruition.
The only public space that serves Mission Bay families is the local library, where story times would draw up to 140 people in a room meant to hold 55. The fire department had to be called in to limit attendance.
I saw a green duck.
We have to turn people away. If we had story times all day long, 7 days a week, I don't think that we would still meet the demand.
Parents in Vancouver, like Melanie Osmak, have had a very different experience. They wouldn't live anywhere else.
We can walk everywhere. We don't waste 3 hours of our day sitting in traffic. We've got a lot of parks. I mean, if you look out my window, you can see 3 of them just from my window. There's 5 parks we can get to in less than 10 minutes.
It's a good place for family and for having kids.
It's such a great community to be around. There's all these programs that are out there that you can do during the day.
Most of those programs takes place in the Roundhouse, a vibrant community center that was created by the transformation of an old railroad maintenance and repair facility.
The Roundhouse is like our rec room, because we do live in smaller spaces, and you can find everything there from, your painting classes to your dance classes to your hockey programs. And it's right by our school, so they actually do a lot of lunch hour programs for our school-age children as well.
This is where many cities fail. They forget that it's about the school, that it's about the things that happen in the community center that would be supportive of that child.
Vancouver now has thousands of school-aged children living in and around its downtown. In Mission Bay, it's a different story.
Most of the kids that Sarah has grown up with in this neighborhood have all left. Personally, I'd like my daughter to grow up in the city. I feel like there's so much the city has to offer her in terms of culture and the diversity.
But without a neighborhood school, without a community center, without the resources that make neighborhoods family-friendly, the Wallaces felt they had no choice. Reluctantly, they left Mission Bay for the suburbs.
If the education problem was solved, we'd still be here. We wouldn't be leaving.
So why is Vancouver's story such a success, while San Francisco's Mission Bay continues to struggle?
The U.S. Declaration of Independence guarantees us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Canadian Constitution guarantees peace, order, and good government. They tend to put community ahead of the individual. We in the United States are a collection of individuals, each trying to achieve our own aspirations. Canadians view themselves as members of a community. So they were able to reach that community agreement and then not squabble over the details of how they would carry out the projects.
Why not meet the challenge of a growing area where everything is carefully planned from the beginning, with parks and recreational areas, schools, churches, shopping centers, and broad curving streets for delightful residential living?
To create a context for stories like these, Saving the City opens with a look back in time, tracing the evolution of the modern city from the 19th century to the post-World War II era.
Downtown was once absolutely necessary. It was the only place most people would go to work and the only place most people would go to shop. That's where everything was, it's where everything came together.
But after World War II, downtown was no longer so necessary.
I think as we look back over the past 50 years, the mistake we made in the post-war years was we stopped designing and building cities for human beings, and we started designing and building them for cars, for vehicles. And suburbanization is the manifestation of this.
At the same time, families were fleeing to the suburbs. Many of the businesses and industries that had thrived in pre-war cities began disappearing too. A case in point was Minneapolis, where a once thriving industrial waterfront fell into decay.
Here we are on the Mississippi River, on the only major falls on the river, with a great story to tell. I mean, who can miss with that?
Well, one of the things that we knew about the city of Minneapolis was that it had a rich history right here along the riverfront. The birthplace of the city is this riverfront.
Minneapolis was the milling capital of the world in the 1880s. By 1930s, that had ended. Milling had gone elsewhere because they no longer needed water power to do milling.
So the industrial riverfront began decades of decline.
It was largely abandoned by the time architecture student Tom Meyer first encountered it. But he saw something else.
So I came to the university in 1966. A couple years later, my friends and I discovered the Central Riverfront. To us, it was a terrific playground. It seemed to be absolutely full of potential.
In fact, Tom's 1971 graduation thesis envisioned the creation of a riverfront museum, celebrating Minneapolis' Milltown roots, and the riverfront remained a central focus of its architectural practice.
Arguably, it's the most historic site in the state of Minnesota.
That's why Tom was one of the first people Sharon Sales Belton called when she wanted to see what could be done to bring the riverfront back.
We assembled a group of all the stakeholders and said, let's get together, let's collaborate, and let's use this as a catalyst for restoring the riverfront. The project was a grand vision, and with every grand vision, guess what happens? Tragedy.
Flames from the fire dominated the skyline last night, and with it, Minneapolis lost a piece of skyline that had been a part of it for more than a century.
I'm sitting at my desk in my office, and somebody calls and says, there's a fire down at the mill.
I panicked. I just was terribly depressed.
By the time it was out, the fire was contained to just one building, but it was obvious that there was little to be salvaged.
The fire burned overnight, and it wasn't till the next morning when I realized that there was something left that we needed to somehow move in and preserve what remained.
After the fire, myself, people from the Historical Society, people of the city got together and really strategized quickly to avoid this building being demolished entirely.
What had started as an academic pipe dream 20 years before was about to become a reality. Tom designed an ingenious glass box to be dropped within the walls of the ruins, and thus was born the Mill City Museum.
And what we have is essentially a freight elevator in which you ride through all the floors of the museum.
For half a century, Minneapolis milled more flour than any other place in the world.
And you actually have a sense that the mill has come back to life.
As often happens, one innovative idea leads to another. The Mill City Museum became an anchor of an arts corridor along the riverfront that now includes the striking new home of the famed Guthrie Theater.
This was a golden opportunity. It was a golden opportunity for us, but we also believed a golden opportunity to put the focus back down here by the river.
Designed by French architect Jean Nouvel, the Guthrie makes a bold architectural statement.
Jean Nouvel had the eccentric notion that we should build the theaters 50 feet in the air and that we should build this cantilever right out almost over the river. And he used to say in that wonderful French accent, the Mississippi is America.
And when Guthrie made that decision, that absolutely cemented this as an essential part of the city.
We thought and knew that we would be able to get past our differences and that we would come together for the greater good, for the good of the community. We believed in ourselves, and we got this done.
The reinvention of the Minneapolis riverfront was undertaken by people who were already in positions of power. Another well-known urban renewal project got a start in a very different manner. New York's High Line, the extraordinary green space that threads through lower Manhattan, wasn't conceived by mayors or architects or urban preservationists. In fact, nobody had ever heard of the two guys who shared this improbable dream.
The High Line has always been a story about David and Goliath, and it's been a constant battle.
Sometimes you see the world in a fresher and better way when you're a little bit outside of a field.
A journalist once referred to Robert and I in an article as a pair of neighborhood nobodies. We weren't architects, we weren't landscape people, we weren't politicians, but we were New Yorkers who knew our neighborhood, and when we saw an opportunity that was being wasted, we stepped forward and said, let's try and do something with it.
Most people, they looked at us, two guys with no experience, in anything related, and said, well, how would you guys do it? The High Line, when we came upon it, was an old elevated rail line, but originally the trains used to run down 10th Avenue, and 10th Avenue was known as Death Avenue because so many people were run over by the trains that they elevated it and created this elevated train track in the 1930s. And it served the industrial side of this western part of Manhattan, which was a lot of factories and warehouses, and brought in a lot of food to New York. The High Line was nicknamed the Lifeline of New York.
The last train ran on the High Line in 1980, and after that it fell into disuse.
It was a derelict railroad with a lot of rats living on it and weeds and trees.
This thing was viewed as a dark, dank liability, something that needed to be pulled down.
Looking at the crowds enjoying the High Line today, it is hard to imagine the many obstacles that Josh and Robert had to overcome.
There was tremendous opposition from property owners. That was the most vehement opposition. They wanted the High Line down.
There were endless questions that seemed unanswerable. How do you deal with the underlying property owners and make them whole? How do you actually get people up there? Will people use it? I think both of us thought the chances of it happening were very, very, very low.
It can get so daunting, or how are you going to raise millions of dollars and get all of these public approvals? It's easier to just look, what's the next incremental step that we can take that will be success?
There were a lot of key turning points. We mounted a lawsuit to stop the demolition of the High Line, which we won. I think the second really big milestone was when the Bloomberg administration announced at the end of 2002 that they were in support of the project.
They believed that if we made the High Line into something extraordinary, it would actually catalyze economic development around it, and indeed it has.
So the economic impact of investing in public open space is a key lesson for cities around the world. Build the public space first, private investment will follow. It really works.
Like many of the places and projects covered in Saving the City, the High Line is a work in progress, a response to an urban challenge that will evolve over time. Saving the City also examines challenges such as climate change, sustainability, that are too complex to be illuminated with a single story. Instead, they'll be considered from varying perspectives throughout the series. Ultimately, whether covered by a single story or across the breadth of the series, the issues examined in Saving the City are the issues that will define the quality of life for almost all of us in the 21st century.
Cities are really the the greatest challenge that we have as a species and also the celebration of our greatest success.
From the team that created Saving the Bay, the multi-award-winning national PBS series, comes an unprecedented look at the urban experience. Informative, entertaining, urgent, saving the city is media that matters.
To learn more, visit savingthecity.org.